On today's episode of You Asked, is no Dolby Vision just a no-go? Should you even try for Dolby Atmos if you have funky ceilings? Is OLED the best replacement for an aging plasma TV? And streaming versus 4K Blu-ray, which is better and why? Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and this is You Asked, the show where I answer questions that you asked in hopes that I can help you and others who have the same tech questions. If you've got a question you'd like to see answered on the show, please send it to youasked@digitaltrends.com, and I'll do my best to get it answered. All right, let's get into it. ZM Knox says, I've been shopping for an OLED TV, and here in the US, that means I only really have 3 brand options: Samsung, LG, and if I want to open my wallet further than I really want to, Sony. But I hesitate to go for a Samsung TV because of their lack of Dolby Vision support. It seems like most services still offer only Dolby Vision and not HDR10 plus content. Does it seem reasonable to cross Samsung off my list of options due to their lack of Dolby Vision support? Is this actually an issue in practice? Okay, so I'm going to partially answer your question here because I've yet to make an up-to-date real-world Dolby Vision versus HDR10 plus video that I can point you to. So for now, I'll say this. First off, I am as frustrated, if not maybe a little more so, as many of you, that Samsung refuses to do business with Dolby on Dolby Vision. Samsung may argue that Dolby Vision is not necessary to provide a notable benefit. It may argue that HDR10 Plus, the standard it helped develop, by the way, is just as good and that it doesn't want to pass the cost of implementing Dolby Vision on to its customers. And you might be surprised to learn that I agree with at least some of its public-facing rationale, but here's my take. I would not write off a Samsung OLED TV just because it doesn't support Dolby Vision. Some of you may be surprised to hear about that because I do like Dolby Vision quite a bit. But the number of times I've seen Dolby Vision content look significantly better than even just HDR10 content, it's been pretty minimal. And in fact, there are times when the Dolby Vision version did not look as good as the standard HDR version. I hope to show everyone this soon, but so far that's my experience. The thing about Dolby Vision is that it is not being used to its full potential by creators. It could be much better than it is right now. It's not bad, it just has so much more potential. But if it were being used to its full potential, then it would be a no-brainer. You'd really be missing out by not having Dolby Vision. But as it stands now, I'm not convinced that that's the case. And it's really hard to say when Dolby Vision will finally become the must-have HDR format because it's so demonstrably better. So as far as Dolby Vision being a need versus want, I still think it's definitely in the want category. However, I can't side with the idea that Samsung doesn't want to pass the cost on to its customers. I think if that were actual rationale, it'd be more like Samsung doesn't want to absorb the cost and therefore make less money, because I don't think Samsung wants to go above market rate with its TV prices like Sony does. Also, every other major brand is supporting it. This whole pushback on Dolby Vision has real strong OLED is inferior vibes, and we see where Samsung came down on that eventually. Look, there is just so much more to picture quality than just the HDR format that's being used. Don't write off a TV like the S90C or the S95C. Those TVs are gorgeous. If you want QD OLED and you don't want to spend Sony money, get the Samsung. And for anyone else who is waffling between a Samsung QLED and a competing QLED TV, my message is about the same. Cutley asks, my question is about the Dolby Atmos effect in a vaulted or sloped ceiling room. Our living room at the lower end has a height of roughly 9.5 feet, while the higher part of the ceiling reaches up to almost 18 feet. As you've already explained in your other videos, upfiring drivers rely upon the reflection of the sound from the ceiling. Having such a sloped ceiling is going to affect these intended reflections. So I assume that creating a Dolby Atmos effect within this room, which we've got a picture of it right here, is not realistic. Unfortunately, this person can't install any kind of reflector or insulator type board since their girlfriend didn't like how they looked. And they go on to ask, is it possible to create such an Atmos effect in this room? And they also acknowledge they can't install in-ceiling speakers either. I've considered the Samsung 990C and the Sony HT-A9 so far. Should I just give up on that and consider a more budget-friendly sound system? Do you have any advice? I have all kinds of advice, but let's start with this. It is true that upfiring Atmos speakers do attempt to use reflection points to help with some of the localized Dolby Atmos effects, and that the nature of your ceiling, from how it's shaped to the texture to the height of the ceiling itself, can have an impact on the effectiveness of some Dolby Atmos effects. However, as I've learned from trying various Atmos systems in various different rooms with wildly varying ceiling conditions, there's almost always some benefit to the presence of upfiring Atmos speakers. The intensity of that difference varies, but I've always gotten something out of it. From our old studio where we had drop-down acoustic tiles meant to absorb sound, to this studio where we've got super high ceilings with some anti-reflection panels up on the ceiling, to another portion of this studio where I have very, very low ceilings. And I think that the reason I'm still getting some Atmos effect in varying degrees is because those Atmos speakers aren't just using reflectivity. There is some directionality to the upfiring speakers too, so you're going to hear them in one fashion or another. And depending on the system you get, processing may be used to play with the phase of the signal in order to achieve that dome of sound effect that we're looking for. So while it may not sound as if you could point to the airplane as it flies over you because you don't have very localized reflective sound, you will get a sense that the plane is going over you and not just around you. My advice would be to try the Sony HT-A9, which does some rather clever processing, and see what you think. You can return it if it doesn't work out for you. If you're not darn impressed, I'd be surprised. Also, the Samsung 990C is an extremely impressive system as well, and I don't think you'd be disappointed with that either. I just think the A9 is so good at processing that it could help overcome some of the characteristics of your room that may not seem so Atmos friendly. Next, Sasha has a question about DTS and their particular setup. The setup would be an LG C2, an LG SC9S soundbar, and the PlayStation 5, and they propose the following connection: PS5 to LG C2 via HDMI, and then audio from the LG C2 to the soundbar via HDMI eARC. And the question is that connection method the way to go? So it is possible you could send DTS to the TV, maybe. I'm not sure if the TV would accept it. But even if it took it in, what came out from the TV would not be DTS. But anyway, your question is how to get DTS to the soundbar. So in that case, what you want to do is connect the PS5 directly to the soundbar and then run a signal that passes the video and audio as well to the LG C2 OLED from the soundbar's HDMI output. So PS5 to soundbar, and then soundbar to the LG C2. That's if you wanted DTS for a very specific reason. Thing is, that soundbar is a Dolby Atmos soundbar, and unless you have some very specific DTS-X material that you want to listen to, I would think you'd want to stick with Dolby Atmos. Your PS5 does support Dolby Atmos. Whether the streaming app that you're using does or doesn't is another question. But frankly, I would just run with your original proposed connection where you go from the PS5 to the LG C2 and then out to the soundbar, and just go with Dolby Atmos audio and forget about DTS in this case. But like I said, if you have something specific you're going for with DTS, going to the soundbar first, then to the TV with the PS5 signal is the way to go. Hey Caleb and crew, I currently have an old Sony plasma TV and I finally want to upgrade to 4K, HDMI 2.1 and all the good things the last 10 years of TV development have brought us. In several forums, I read that the only sensible way to upgrade from a plasma would be an OLED TV, since I would be underwhelmed with the picture quality of an LCD in comparison to my old plasma. Do you agree with this statement? Or would, for example, a Hisense U8K or similar TV also be a significant and reasonable upgrade, not only from a technical, but also from a picture quality standpoint? I mostly watch movies and TV shows via streaming apps, YouTube, and I play on my PS5. Thanks in advance, and best wishes from Germany, Garrett. That Germany part is relevant, so I left that in. Anyway, Garrett, I am neither going to agree or disagree with those forum folks because I don't want to draw the ire of the forum folks. Anyone who ever has drawn the ire of forum folks knows what I'm talking about. It ain't pretty, and it definitely ain't helpful. But I will say that I think I understand why they're saying what they're saying. They are probably thinking that you're used to perfect black levels and no blooming, and that the only TV tech that can do that is OLED, which is pretty much true. So in order to help keep you from being frustrated with your new TV, they want you to steer clear of LCD-based technology. And all of that makes a lot of sense. I can't say that I disagree with that logic. However, some LCD TVs are extremely impressive, and you're going from a non-HDR TV to an HDR TV, which is in and of itself a massive upgrade, so long as it's a decent HDR TV. Also, some of the best LCD-based TVs have local dimming systems that are so good. I mean, they do a good job of approaching OLED black levels, and they manage to minimize blooming to a great degree. So I think that a really great LCD-based TV like the Sony X90L or the Hisense U8K or TCL QM8 as examples would probably feel like a huge upgrade to your plasma in many, if not most respects. It really depends on how sensitive you are and what strikes you when you're looking at a good picture. I will caution though that the Hisense U8K in Germany is not necessarily the same as the Hisense U8K that we have here and rave about in the US. So I'm not sure that model is the one you should necessarily be looking at. That brings up an entirely different discussion, but I'm gonna have to stop there for now. Jeremiah says, I have an LG G1, Apple TV 4K, PS5, Sonos Arc, and Sub. For any current 4K HDR content that I consume, it's via iTunes movie purchases and streaming via Apple TV, Max, Netflix, Disney+, Hulu, and Prime. I saw the 4K Blu-ray release from Criterion of WALL-E. If I were to play that 4K Blu-ray via my PS5 Blu-ray drive, would I notice a dramatic difference in picture and audio fidelity to the 4K Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos version that I own via iTunes and the version on Disney+? So Jeremiah, I'm gonna use your question to have a discussion about the best movie streaming service options and how streaming versus 4K Blu-ray compares, while also trying to answer your question. First off, I don't know how to quantify dramatic to you in terms of the difference between a 4K Blu-ray playback versus streaming. What I can say is that I can clearly see the difference, mostly in big color areas where I'll see banding on the streaming version and no banding on the disc version. Fine detail is also better on the disc, and there's less noise. That's because the disc has so much more information coming at you. The disc also has lossless audio, which many folks report offers a clearly audible improvement over the lossy streaming version of the same soundtrack. For me, disc-based playback is definitely superior to streaming in almost all cases. Not everybody is as sensitive though. Now, as a Blu-ray player, the PS5 it's okay. It's definitely better than the Xbox Series X. Still, for the best Blu-ray playback, and I promise I'm not just trying to get you to spend more money here, for the best Blu-ray experience, you might want to consider a dedicated player. It's not necessary, but because you clearly care about getting the best quality, you might want to consider a standalone player. You don't have to shoot for the moon with a player. A solid Sony or Panasonic will do fine. Everybody who's seen the Magnetar unboxing might think that I require a ridiculous over-the-top player, and that's just not true. For streaming playback though, consider getting Movies Anywhere. This is not an ad, no sponsor here. Movies Anywhere takes all the digital movie purchases that you've made, including from iTunes, and puts them all in one place, which is convenient. But the real benefit is that Movies Anywhere has shown to offer the highest bit rate compared to other streaming services like iTunes, Vudu, and Amazon Prime Video. If you have a bandwidth cap on your internet connection, that could be an issue, so keep that in mind. But also, discs don't touch your internet. So if you do have a bandwidth cap, there's another reason to get the disc. Also, with the disc, you own that movie for real. Nobody can take it away from you unless you get burglarized, and I really hope you don't. Anyway, I can't say that you truly own the digital version for what that's worth. Thanks as always for watching, everyone. What did you think of this week's questions? Let me know down in the comments so I can pick the best questions each week. Your feedback is hugely helpful. While you're down there, consider liking this video and subscribing if you don't want to miss the next videos we put out. I'll see you on the next one, and until then, here's 2 other videos I think you might like. No, I got it. I need to be less dumb.